All right, let's dive into one of the most brilliant and honestly most crucial processes happening in your body, the clotting cascade. It's like a tiny microscopic medic that springs into action the second you get a cut. And understanding how it works, well, that's key to understanding how we survive from one day to the next.
I mean, think about it. You get a paper cut, it stings, but pretty quickly, it just stops. Why? It's not magic. It's an incredible biological chain reaction, a cascade that's perfectly designed to plug a leak in seconds and stop a tiny problem from becoming a huge one. So here's our game plan for this lecture. First, we'll get the big picture of this cascade. Then we'll see how the whole chain reaction kicks off. We'll meet the most important player in the whole process, see how the final clot actually gets built, and then wrap up by talking about why this whole system has to be perfectly balanced. Okay, so imagine there's a breach in a blood vessel. Your body doesn't just freak out. Nope, it executes this pre-programmed, super efficient emergency plan. And that plan is what we call the clotting cascade. This diagram right here is going to be our map for this whole explanation. Now, I know it looks a little complicated at first glance, but don't worry about that. Just think of it like a flowchart for saving your life. Every single box, every arrow has a purpose, and we're going to walk through it step by step. Every great chain reaction needs a trigger, right? Something to get it all started. For the clotting cascade, that trigger is the injury itself. It's basically like tipping over the first domino in this incredibly fast and complex biological rally. So let's look at the top left of our map here. The second a blood vessel gets damaged, these tiny little cell fragments called platelets absolutely rush to the scene. They start clumping together and release this key substance, platelet phospholipid. Think of this as the very first critical alarm bell ringing. And you'll notice how all these initial signals, they all start to funnel towards one single point. You've got the platelet phospholipid, you've got other clotting factors in the blood, like this really important one here, factor X, and they all have one job: find and activate a protein called prothrombin. You can think of prothrombin as kind of like a sleeping giant. It's just floating around harmlessly in your blood plasma, completely inactive, just waiting for that emergency signal from an injury. But when it gets that call, everything is about to change. And that brings us to the absolute star of the show. This is the master regulator that takes this little local response and just cranks it up, turning it into a full-blown clot-forming machine. Let's talk about thrombin. Right here, dead center of our diagram, you can see what happens. That sleeping giant, prothrombin, gets activated and it transforms into thrombin. And its position here in the middle, that's not an accident. It's central because almost every other part of this cascade is connected to it. It's the hub. Thrombin is just an incredible multitasker. It's juggling 4 critical jobs all at once. It starts building the actual net of the clot, and at the same time, it activates another factor to make that net super strong. But here's the really genius part. It creates these feedback loops. It actually tells the body to make more of itself and call in more platelets, basically amplifying its own signal. Which, brings up a really important question. A slow clot is a useless clot. So how does the body ramp this whole thing up with such incredible speed and force? Well, the answer is right there in those feedback loops. Just look at these arrows looping back from thrombin on our diagram. It's not just doing one job and moving on. It is literally amplifying the very signals that created it in the first place. By telling the body to make more of itself and to send more platelets, a single molecule of thrombin leads to a flood of thousands more. It's an amplifier, turning a tiny spark into a bonfire to make sure the response is overwhelming and, most importantly, fast. So, thrombin has cranked the signal up to 11. Now it's time to do its main job, building the physical structure that's actually going to stop the bleeding. It's time to weave the net. This is where the clot starts to take physical shape. Thrombin finds another protein floating around in the blood called fibrinogen, and it snips it, transforming it into these long, sticky strands of fibrin. These strands immediately start linking up, forming a kind of loose, flimsy net over the site of the injury. But, a loose net isn't going to hold up under pressure. So thrombin performs one last critical job. It activates something called factor 13. And this factor, it's like a construction worker. It comes in and starts cross-linking all those loose fibrin strands, locking them together, turning them into a strong, stable, solid mesh. And that is your finished clot. That's the barrier that stops you from bleeding. Now, for as powerful and life-saving as this whole cascade is, it's also incredibly dangerous if it isn't perfectly controlled. This system has to know exactly when to start, how big of a clot to build, and, maybe most importantly, when to stop. And the stakes here could not be higher. On the one hand, if the cascade is too weak or doesn't work right, you get uncontrolled bleeding, like in a condition such as hemophilia. But if it's too aggressive, if it starts when it shouldn't, it can form dangerous clots inside your blood vessels. That's a condition called thrombosis, and it can cause heart attacks and strokes. The body is constantly walking this razor's edge. So, the main thing to take away from all this is that the clotting cascade isn't just a simple A plus B equals C reaction. It's this incredibly elegant system that's defined by its speed, its amazing power of amplification, and its absolutely life or death need for precise control. It is truly a masterpiece of microscopic engineering.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? This whole thing is a constant, high-stakes balancing act happening inside of us all the time. And it kind of leaves us with a final question to ponder. What other incredible microscopic dramas, just like this one, are unfolding inside you right now to keep you alive?